Welcome to Precision Animal Training, where we teach big lessons through the lens of getting precise science-based behavior. I'm Kier like your ear, Kirsten, Crawl like a baby Kraljevic, animal trainer, behavior nerd, and your host. This is a show about real, lasting change. The science of precision, the power of pursuing perfect timing, the art of truly seeing and shaping behavior. Whether you're working with chickens, dogs, dolphins, parrots, horses, or even ourselves. Expect real stories from the field, timeless principles that transfer across species, and practical insights you can apply immediately. Because if you can train a chicken with clarity, kindness, and razor-sharp precision, you can train almost anything. So grab a notebook. This is your personal masterclass in curiosity, mechanics, and true behavioral understanding. In this episode, we fast forward from Dr. Bailey's first day as the Navy dolphin trainer to a deep dive into the roots of modern animal training, the influence of Keller and Marian Breland, their collaboration with B.F. Skinner, and the evolution of operant conditioning. You'll discover how young innovators, fueled by data and experimentation, revolutionized the science of behavior, from pigeons guiding bombs to precision teaching for humans. If you want to understand the mechanics behind positive reinforcement and why observation is the trainer's superpower, you're in the right place. Let's unpack the past to empower your future. I'm sitting with one of my favorite people as well as my mentor, Dr. Bob Bailey. We left off last time where he had just gotten the job as the Navy dolphin trainer. I would like to move ahead a little bit to, hey, he got the job, now what does he do? Actually, I'm going to ask you, you got the job, now what do you do?
Well, what I did, happily, was to meet two individuals, Keller and Marian Breland. They're from Hot Springs, Arkansas. They're both psychologists, and they worked with B.F. Skinner in the 1930s and 40s. And I would say it was from the Brelands that if I have any real qualifications as an animal trainer, I really got it from them. They passed on to me their philosophy, if you will, and the idea of developing skills. And so that's what I did over the next many years, but under the tutelage of the Brelands.
Okay, so Brelands. I feel like a little kid in a candy store because I don't know where I want to start this one. But let's start with what they did with you, how they worked with you. What did you work with to initially start getting your training chop?
Well, I guess I first have to say something about the Brelands because they each brought something special to me. Keller was a Mississippian, and he was an industrial psychologist. And he went to Minnesota, which is where Skinner was at the time, in order to learn about the discipline of psychology. And Marian was just one of these people who was smart in the best sense of the word. She had a photographic memory, and in the literal context, literal term, photographic memory. She could read a page in a book and hand you the book and recite it word for word without any problem at all. And she retained that page for years and years. The real point is as a team, they were fantastic as animal trainers and also in the science behavior, if you will. And Skinner had really brought behaviorism to the fore. He, of course, followed some earlier psychologists who had been using rats, but he used them in a really totally different way. He changed the environment and got the response, let's say, from the animal. The animal had to, let's say, perform certain behaviors in order to earn reinforcement. And Skinner published a book, Behavior of Organisms, that is nothing more than the description of 188, let's say, Skinner box performances by rats, white rats. On that, he came up with the title Behavior of Organisms, as if that really described all of whatever behavior any organism ever had. A little grandiose, maybe. But nonetheless, he turned psychology into a real science, or attempted to, let's say. But they worked on a project during the early parts of the war, World War II, where they trained pigeons to guide bombs. The Brelands went through this with Skinner and saw how well this program worked. The fact that they could really predict with great precision the behavior of the pigeon in this program. And I guess you would say they decided they would build a business in order to prove that the technology works, that Skinner really had a science of behavior. Especially Keller really thought that psychology was a little soft and needed a little firming up. And so he really believed that this technology of Skinner's could work outside of the classroom, outside of the laboratory. So together, they formed a company in 1943. They formed this company, Animal Behavior Enterprises. And at first, they couldn't really go into a business. It was wartime. So they were working there for Skinner. But they were also training in a barn. They bought a farm, borrowed $3,000 from Marian's mother, and they started training animals. And their first effort was to duplicate everything in the behavior of organisms, but with different animals, cats and dogs and sheep and goats and chickens. Anyway, they never made it through all 188 experiments, but they did enough to prove to themselves that this technology really worked. And they decided first to try it in the field with dogs. And so Keller trained 6 field dogs for hunting purposes and entered contests. They have these field contests. And Keller won. And using his new technology, particularly the conditioned reinforcer, which the Brelands and Skinner discovered really during the experiments of training pigeons to guide bombs. Well, it didn't really do very much in the dog training world because the other trainers that were in the contest where where Keller was working his dogs, they just wanted to know where they got the dogs, what were the litter mates. So to them, it was all breeding. That's all it was. And if you were lucky enough to have a well-bred dog, that would be the champion. Well, Keller didn't believe so, neither did Marian. But they decided that dogs wouldn't be the animals they worked with. They decided to use chickens and rabbits and some other animals to advertise farm feed. And they sold it to General Mills, a major company in Minnesota. And by 1950, they were giving animal shows all over the United States. They did that in a space of 3 years. They went from in Minnesota, and in 3 years, they were coast to coast, border to border, and doing thousands and thousands of animal shows. Probably of more import, they trained 12 other people to train the animals and to give the shows. And that was the first time, as far as we know, anybody had written a training manual based on Skinner's basic concept of operant conditioning.
Wow. There's a tremendous lot of things in there that we need to unpack for the audience. But I just want to say, wow, and I want to point out some things that I hope people picked up on. One was the connection to Skinner, and I'll give you my take on Skinner. That's another whole episode with Skinner and his roommate and everything. But what I hope you're taking away as a young trainer is that these were all young people. Even Skinner was fairly young at the time. These were all young people out there, curious, keeping data and figuring out things that nobody before them that kept. Well, I can't say that nobody before them did it. We don't have record. Is that fair? We don't have the record of people before them doing such things.
No, data collection was not a big part of animal training, certainly. Now, in the laboratories, people were keeping data, but Skinner kept a different kind of data. He recorded information on how fast the animal responded, how rapidly did they start doing the behavior. He recorded a lot more pieces of data, different aspects of the animal's behavior. Before, it was more or less whether the animal either did it or didn't. And, well, just seldom any more data than that. Most of psychology up till the time of John
Watson.
I
didn't want to interrupt you, but I could see on your face.
Anyway, psychologists did keep some data, but the data collected by John Watson and some other psychologists at the time was more detailed and gave you more information about the response, the behavior of the animal.
So I want to take a little break here. And when we come back, I want to back you up a little bit to Skinner's start. Give a little bit of my take on Skinner. And then if you can go into Skinner and his roommate, I think that would be something people couldn't find other places. So I would like to go over that here. Are you an animal trainer ready to sharpen your skills to a legendary level? Or a corporate leader looking for a fresh, powerful way to boost team dynamics, decision-making, and leadership? Discover Kirsten's Chicken Workshops, an immersive 5-day experience rooted in the science-based curated exercises of the legendary Bob and Marian Bailey. Train a live chicken using the principles of operant conditioning, like positive reinforcement. Why chickens? They're fast, honest teachers that instantly reveal where you need to improve your training skills. No fluff, just real results that transfer to dogs, horses, or any species you want to train, and even to leading people more effectively. Trainers call it life-changing. Dr. Bob Bailey himself endorses it as the ultimate mechanical skill builder. So visit Kirsten'sChickenWorkshops.com right now and sign up for the wait list. Spots fill fast. Train a chicken, change the way you train and lead forever. Head to Kirsten'sChickenWorkshops.com today. Like I said, we unpacked a lot in there that I think is so important for people to understand in the context of what was happening in the world at that time, much less the country. We're talking
early 40s.
So I want to back you up to the start of Skinner and Skinner with his roommate, because it's important to me that when young people listen to this, that they don't box themselves in anywhere. And I hope that they can see themselves in a dorm room somewhere, just being curious, just, taking the information that's available to them and asking what if, and not being afraid to innovate and go outside of the box. And I think Skinner and his roommate are a good example of that.
I guess you're talking about Fred Keller. He was Skinner's roommate. And as students, they shared a lot of information. They did a lot of discussion. It was really Fred Keller who had this idea of studying behavior, specifically with changing environments. And how fast did they change their behavior? How much could they change their behavior in a given period of time? And how did they respond to how the animals responded to these different stimuli? And they would talk about this. And Fred Keller decided he would start applying this idea of changing behavior to education. Now, Skinner thought this was interesting and actually worked with Fred Keller for quite a little while on education. But it was Fred Keller who really picked up on the education facet of this and how fast could they teach people to do things. Well, Skinner thought that was a little complex, that he wanted to get an idea of how organisms, not just humans, but how organisms change their behavior with time and with changing environments. So they kind of separated their ways there, with Fred Keller going into the human education aspect. That is Fred Keller, tried to interest education types, the people in education, of the idea of applying this idea of precise teaching. And that's what he called his philosophy anyway, is precision teaching, his methodology, if you will. Well, he didn't have much success, and later on in the late 1940s, he went to Brazil. And it's in Brazil that precision teaching really flourished. And when he came back into the United States in the 1950s, that there were actually quite a few people began to accept more and more of Fred Keller's approach. Now, Fred Keller proved his point during World War II by invading the communications field in the military and using his new style, if you will, teaching approach, was able to train more of the telegraph people, the code people, trained more than the Army and Navy and Air Force even wanted. He greatly accelerated the teaching of military personnel during World War II. And of course, Skinner went into his Project Pelican, where he was training pigeons to guide bombs. So in both of them, whether for Fred Keller or Fred Skinner, they both found ways of changing behavior quickly, efficiently, precisely, in a very short period of time. So they both made their contributions. It is just that Fred Skinner published his book in the 30s, and it caught on in the psychological community. Later on, precision teaching did come, but it never caught on as well as the operant conditioning did with Fred Skinner.
I'm just going to say, shut the front door. Did you hear what we really just went over there? In the initial episode, we talked about stimulus control, right? Controlling that narrative, getting that organism to do what you want it to do. And let me just say, they're talking about using positive reinforcement. They're talking about essentially motivating these organisms into cooperating with them. They're talking about teaching methods so precise and they proved to themselves through just the volume of students that completed this program with this, is it fair to say, Morse code?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they systematized teaching Morse code using positive reinforcement. Do you hear how powerful that is? Do you want to explain why that's so powerful, Bob, given your experience with so many species across so many environments?
Well, what it means is that the technology itself is translatable. It's scalable. It can teach a cephalopod, a squid. You can teach it to do things the same way, not the same things, but the same way that you could train a human or a dog to do certain behaviors that you might like. The real thing is that the training principles, the teaching principles, are essentially the same, regardless of species, regardless of behavior, as long as you control the environment in a way where the animal is not afraid, is the animal is in, let's say, a condition to learn, that you can teach using the principles of operant conditioning. There's also something called respondent conditioning, which is in a, let's say, a little different territory. But by combining respondent and operant conditioning, you can train virtually anything the animal is capable of performing. And that's the same way with humans.
I personally think it almost feels like you can learn a superpower, meaning that you can learn the mechanical skills, you can learn the timing, you can learn the observational skills to make, I'm going to say, the world as your oyster. I don't know if you ever trained an oyster, Bob, but essentially it's so empowering. These principles, which I learned through the chicken workshops, well, let me back up. I thought I learned them through the chicken workshops. I don't think I really mastered them until I began to teach the chicken workshops. So I'd like to back up a little bit. My background is anthropology, and I took this project, and when I say this project, I mean trying to preserve the history and the exercises and the intent that you had in your chicken workshops that you developed to train animal trainers to teach the mechanical skills of applying principles that Skinner laid down with Watson, basically, or Keller, not Watson, Keller.
Well, it was Skinner who really developed the basic principles, let's say.
Yeah, so again, I deep dove, is that a word or did I make it up, into this in these chicken workshops, right? Because what we learned there was, hey, here's these principles, not theory, but principles. And essentially, they were observations. And let's go back to that. Let's remember little Bob on the step with the ants. The guy is hardwired with these observational skills. And Skinner, I'm going to say, was as well. And he observed these principles that happen, whether you're watching or not, when an organism is learning. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to lay down that that's what Skinner gave us. Skinner was a stickler for saying, hey, if you can't observe it, we're not going to talk about it. That somehow in the literature, because when I go back and try to, weave this into modern day, that somewhere in the literature got him a bad rap. Like he was somehow ignoring emotions. And what I've learned from you in the work that you did with him and that Marian and Keller did with him, that wasn't what he was saying. Not really.
No, well, he was saying that if I can't measure it, I can't really talk about it precisely in scientific language. I can't ascribe lots of characteristics to it because I'm not even sure what I'm talking about.
Right.
What we can talk about is behavior. And of course, there are certain emotions that are connected to certain behaviors. But the real point is that when Skinner was talking about this, he really said that with the technology he had at that time, he could not go into all of this brain activity that's going on. He knew it was there. It had to be there. Science told him it was there. But could he really describe the mechanics of it, of what was really going on? No, he couldn't. So he chose to study the one thing that he could really see, that he could measure, and that's behavior.
In a way, I am so grateful that he stuck by his guns on that one. Now, don't get me wrong. I am fascinated with the idea of consciousness, which is becoming a huge deal now with AI. We're going to have to define, what does that mean to be conscious? What is intelligent? What does all that mean? And I eat all that stuff up. But what I learn and what I teach is what Skinner said. If I can't observe it, I can't measure it. And yes, we've gotten better at measuring things because of technology. So yes, now there's scientists out there now. I can think of one, Dr. Michael Levin, and I'm sure there's others that are applying the principles of behaviorism to cells and oocytes and things like that. Skinner does deserve the credit because they are able to measure it and observe it, because he wouldn't let the industry go so off the rails. Am I wrong in saying that?
Well, I'm not sure. It depends on how you interpret some of the data that's out there.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I'll back off of that one, but it does fascinate me, and it is something that I don't think he should get such a bad rap for. I think he was more misunderstood about.
Well, yes, but what's new about scientists being misunderstood?
Touché, Bob. And on that note, I'm going to say we're going to wrap today up. I'm going to thank Bob again for being here with me. I'm living a dream right now, kids, not going to lie. So we will tune back in, and we will deep dive into Marian and Keller, because there's a lot there to unpack as well.
Before we wrap up, let's highlight a few key takeaways from this episode. First, we explored the deep roots of behavioral science, from the pioneering work of B.F. Skinner and his colleagues
to the groundbreaking animal training techniques developed by the Brelands.
Their willingness to innovate, collect data, and ask what if transformed animal training, and it all started with curiosity. Second, we unpacked how powerful and universal operant conditioning is. As Dr. Bob Bailey shared, whether you're training pigeons, dolphins, or even humans, the principles remain the same if you control the environment and focus on careful observation. And third, we revisited B.F. Skinner's core philosophy. If you can't observe it, you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, you can't truly understand or improve behavior. That focus on observable data might seem limiting, but as we discussed, it laid the foundation for a scientific approach that works across species and settings. So as you head into your own training, remember the importance of curiosity, data, and staying open to new possibilities. Keep watching, keep measuring, and never stop asking why. Thanks so much for listening. And next time on Precision Animal Training, we'll dig even deeper into the legendary work
of Marian and Keller Breland and discover how their legacy lives on in trainers everywhere. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Precision Animal Training Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen. It helps spread the word to more trainers like you. Share the show with a friend who could use a behavior breakthrough. Want to dive deeper into precision animal training? Head to kirstenschickenworkshops.com to learn about the workshops, sign up, or join the waitlist for the next series. That's kirstenschickenworkshops.com, where legendary science-based behavioral technology meets tomorrow's top trainers. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, remember, train a chicken, change the way you train forever. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios.